Hi. Very happy to say that this is the third podcast from the Voters Union of Accountability Nation with Fred Satilli. And what we're going to talk about today is something kind of avoidable. It's the pandemic. Today is April 15th, 2020, and I've been on this lockdown now for 1 full month. And, you know, it's funny how we always have something to fear, right? If it's not the Red Menace, the commie threat, it's the scourge of rock and roll entering our society. And now we have the pandemic. And the pandemic has stricken fear throughout the heart of America and throughout the world. And I'm not too happy about that. I'm going to ramble a little bit this time. I don't have a really coherent presentation. Well, I don't know if it's not coherent, but the reason for this is a lack of good information. I've read and studied and watched and listened, and I have a whole bunch of thoughts. Now, the first thing is I want to tell the story of Laura. And there's a movie called Laura, and it stars a beautiful actress named Gene Tierney. And one of the things I love about the movie is the incredible theme song. The song is Laura by David Raxon, and it, along with You Only Live Twice, the James Bond theme, just lovely pieces of music for the soundtrack of our life. And the thing about Gene Tierney is, during World War II, she contracted rubella, and she had a very badly birth-defected daughter. I think the little girl's name was Daria. And Daria never developed the mental capacity past the age of 2, and she had physical deformities, and she was in some amount of pain and discomfort. But she did live, I think, about 60 years. And Gene Tierney dealt with this, with the care for this child and everything, and everybody around her was supportive. And one day, years down the road, a woman came to her and said, "You know, Miss Tierney, I always loved you. You're always my favorite actress. And one time back during the war, I was working on a Marine base, and we were on lockdown because of the German measles, but I managed to sneak away and come and see you. And we met at that time. We met once before when I had the measles way back in I think it was 43 or somewhere in there." And reportedly, Gene Tierney just looked at her and froze and looked at her and just walked away. And I looked that story up while I was researching all these other viruses, and boy, the comments under it were, they were all expressed some amount of violence towards the person who had snuck out of the quarantine, So anyway, as I began to look at these viruses and gather information, I found it was very, very difficult to gather information. And of course, the first place I went to was the CDC, and because of my adoration of Gene Tierney and my love of the movie and the beautiful piece of music, the measles came right up. And so I looked into the measles, and what I found out was that, first of all, we have a vaccination for the measles. No one should get the measles. But in 2014, and I couldn't get other years, but in 2014, 140,000 people died of the measles, most of them under the age of 5. Now, I don't even like to see a little kid get sick. If 140,000 people, mostly children under 5, died, can you imagine the amount of children that got real sick and didn't die, and maybe even had like scars on their face from measles or something like that? It's a horrifying thing. That's something that we can do something about. We have a measles vaccine. Now, I want that addressed. Now, worldwide. Now, in my search of that, I ran into the anti-vaccine people. And there are people who, for very good reason, are afraid of vaccinations, because there are stories of a child being given an inoculation and going into convulsions and dying. That's not good. So I became conflicted. Am I for this or am I against this? But what I seemed to gather was that these vaccinations are not just one vaccination. They're a cocktail of many, many, and some of them have heavy metals and strychnine and all kind of stuff in them. And it's no wonder that you get sick or have some kind of other damage, like perhaps autism. These measles vaccines are supposed to be administered like once when you're 1, and then a couple years later you get a booster. And autism usually isn't observed until the age of 1.5 to 2 to 3. So the idea that this is causing that, it might be true, it might not, but when I was a little kid, I got a lot of vaccinations because when I was a little kid, my family was sent to Venezuela. And before we went there, man, they stuck me with all. But when they gave them to me, the tetanus shot was a tetanus shot. The one to prevent dengue was one to prevent dengue. It wasn't one shot with 16 different things. And any of you who take prescriptions know that you're not supposed to combine prescriptions, right? So you don't know that maybe if this inoculation and that inoculation are combined, they create some other problem. I am not a biologist. I am not a chemist. I'm not a scientist in any way. I'm just trying to gather information, and I couldn't gather really good information. But what I could gather is we have a way to fight measles. And I don't like seeing people, little kids getting sick, and I don't like to hear about them dying. I have a mom who's 86 years old in the nursing home with 50 other residents. Every 2 to 3 weeks, one of those residents doesn't come home from the hospital. And a lot of these residents, one of them's a lady named Dorothy. She's 102 years old right now. Walks around without a walker. She's a lovely person. Tells you jokes. She told me a dirty joke that was, I can't even repeat it. I mean, I certainly can and have, but I'm not going to do it on a recording. But another one of my favorites was Mr. Lee. And Mr. Lee had really advanced Alzheimer's. He was a very polite gentleman, always said hello to me, but didn't remember me one day to the next. But he was always sitting under a speaker. They played light jazz throughout the nursing home, and this guy loved the vibraphone, and when it was playing, he was just rocking out with it, you know, like, and it was just so good to see him that even in his changed mental state, that he really identified with music and loved it, and just, it was the pleasure of his life at that time. And then one day, it was, where's Mr. Lee? And he was gone, and his family was removing his stuff from his room and everything. And I really, I mean, death is a train coming for us all, and I get that. But still, some of these people, in the nursing home, it's one thing. Little kids is an entirely different thing. Entirely, that was crushing for me. And then I continued. And I found out that there's another virus that there's a cure for, and that's hepatitis C. We have the cure. It's a 12-week program. It's pills. And what I gotta, in 2016, I want to give the right, in 2000, no, I'm glad I did this. In 2014, 19,600 people died from Hep C. In 2014, there was 400,000 cases and 19,600 deaths from something that we have a cure for. The problem is that the cure is from $50,000 to $75,000. Some of these pills are $1,000 each. Now, in reality, the pills don't cost $1,000 to provide the materials or provide the technology to make the pill, you know, the cooking or the manufacture of the pill. It's nowhere near there, but these pharmaceutical companies have invested millions and tens of millions and hundreds of millions of dollars into these research projects. But it's not just the research. It's the 10 years of political lobbying and testing and incredible impediments that they have to go through to bring this stuff to market. So they have the cure, It's only 2020 now. That was 2014, right? We had the cure. We just weren't past the 10 years of lobbying and paying off people and making contributions to political campaigns or whatever it takes to get through the FDA. I don't know. I'm not making any accusations, but my fiction writer, conspiracy theory mind immediately sails right out there. Okay, so the thing about the cure is, because it's so much money, insurance companies don't want to pay for it. However, they will allow you to have hepatitis C, carry it for years, have it damage your liver, get cirrhosis of liver, inflamed liver, hardened liver, into the point where you need dialysis, and then your insurance company will be only too happy to send you to dialysis twice a week, year after year for 20 years until finally you die. Somewhere in there, something doesn't make sense. We need to do better. We're having a worldwide pandemic right now, and the world is responding. Scientists from all over the world are, look, this hydrochloroquine, we didn't know that word 30 days ago. I couldn't even say that. It took me 2 weeks to remember the word. And it's a very promising treatment for this thing. I'm hearing it all anecdotally. I am not a scientist, but there are plenty of people who are thrilled that they had hydrochloroquine. So it's out there. Bureaucracy is a problem. Now, since we're on bureaucracy, and I told you this was going to be a little bit rambling, and I wanted to make a much more scientific presentation, but my studies just left me freaked out. And then yesterday, I got an email from my Congresswoman, Nanette Barragan, and Nanette Barragan sent a video clip. That's why I know she doesn't just say Annette Barragan. She says, Annette Barragan! And then I thought I heard a dog whistle, right? Barragan, hey, vote for me. Barragan, Ringo Bardingo, I'm Nanette Barragan. Anyway, I really resent that, Just calm down. I'm Nanette Barragan. And, I'm going to have a town hall and tell you to stay inside and wear a mask or whatever it is she wanted to do. And that would have been fine, but what she did include was something very upsetting for me. And she said, we have to start to acknowledge and fight the silent pandemic, which is increased domestic violence against women and children that have been exacerbated. Now, I don't know how many people who say Barragan are real familiar with the word exacerbated, but I could be wrong. Oh, I thought I heard a dog whistle. Anyway, I'm sorry for being snarky, but it really offends me. Just be a regular person, okay? Never mind the dog whistles. We're in Los Angeles. She said that women and children are being abused because of the pandemic lockdown, the quarantine. And the reason I'm offended is because there's a real lot of men being abused with domestic violence. It's not just women and children. A real lot of men are coming home to horrible circumstances. A real lot of men don't want to come home because of horrible circumstances. A real lot of elders are being abused. She didn't include them, grandmoms and granddads. And a lot of this abuse of the grandmoms and granddads might be being perpetrated by the children. The children abusing their grandparents. It could be that grandparents are abusing the children. Well, that comes under women and children. So I guess the grandparents are just, they're bad. Okay, now, this thing I'm saying about the abuse, this could be done by a mother-in-law. There's lots of sitcoms where there's a mother-in-law, and whether the mother-in-law is the mother-in-law of the husband or the mother-in-law of the wife, when the mother-in-law shows up, for some reason in sitcoms, people find it funny that they got some nasty, nasty person who just won't quit and is driving some poor man absolutely insane, or driving some poor woman to the point of, just to the point of violence, And so this, now it's 2020 now. The Flintstones are no longer in power. So I doubt that Nanette will ever hear this. But, you know, it's not just women and children, okay? You take that antiquated stuff and stuff it, because it's not good. And I'll tell you, I come to this anger and this opinion and this anger from a real knowledgeable place. For 6 years, I attended the Los Angeles County Council on Domestic Violence every month. And they have a month when they're shut down, and they only have 10 meetings a year, and I sometimes miss one or two. So I'll say truthfully, probably 8 times a year over 6 years. And the reason I went to this was because the domestic violence people lost a giant lawsuit in California because they weren't giving services to men, and they got slapped on the wrist over that. And an organization sent me there to monitor this, and they were well aware of my presence. But the tragedy is that they would have these meetings every month, and they would be attended by about 60 women and 1 or 2 or 3 guys. And most of these people that were there, I'll say most of these women because the men were superfluous, but they all they either were compelled because they were a police officer or because they owned a business that was in the shelter business or whatever. But you'd see a couple guys once in a while. And in that group of 60 women would be 50 beautiful, wonderful, caring human beings trying to make a better world by reducing domestic violence in any way they could. The other 10 were the leaders. They were the ones at the head of the table. They were the ones facing the other 50 in the dynamic room. And they were concerned with funding. They wanted funding for women's shelters. They wanted funding for anything that had to do with women's shelters. They were there, they were in the business, they were this, they were very political. I remember them working hard to get Sheila Kuehl in office and being absolutely ecstatic when she was put into office. And I remember when Rihanna hit the guy driving the car with her high heel and he turned around and smacked her. They were ecstatic over that. They said, we can ride this scandal for years. I saw the joy on their faces. It was pretty obscene. So here we have the Domestic Violence Council. Now, this is a council put together by the county supervisors, the 5 little queens, and this is to advise them on how to deal with domestic violence in Los Angeles County. Now, in all the time that this Domestic Violence Council has been active, domestic violence in LA County hasn't been reduced one little bit. So there are people that are professionals that are being paid. All the people in that room are being paid somehow through the shelters, through the women's shelters. No men's shelters here. 1 or 2 that provide some. There's one up in Lancaster all the way out there that's real good about it. Those people are outstanding. They're intellectually and philosophically, they're perfect, you know. But the rest of them, wow. So I'm not happy about Annette Barragan and her. We have to protect the women and children from domestic violence because we need to protect everybody. And lawfully in California, everyone must be included. We include everybody here. We don't make special organizations to protect one group or protect another group. We want to protect everybody equally, whether they're handicapped, whether it's a racial issue, whether it's a gender issue. Everybody needs to get the same protection. So I'm very unhappy with her. And being that we are the Voters Union of Accountability Nation, I think that reparation from her is in order. I think that she should have to attend some counseling and come get a little sensitivity training so she doesn't put garbage like that out on the internet. Anyway, I'm sorry if I delivered this in an angry way. I realize that's not nice. And but I'm not happy with the way the pandemic is being run, the lack of information, the amount of uncertainty of where this is coming from, who was responsible, and when did they know, and who could have helped, and who could have done different things differently, and all that kind of stuff. It's not fair to people to give them all this uncertainty. Uncertainty breeds fear, and then you're in a home with your family and you're afraid, it's just all not good. So some real accountability here is in order. I guess I can stop the rant now. There are other subjects I wanted to bring up, but I don't want to extend this any longer. I really appreciate you listening. I really appreciate you subscribing and watching the previous episodes or listening to them on the podcast. I guess I should smile at the end. My name's Fred Satilli, and we'll get through this, but hopefully next week we'll have a happier subject. Anyway, thanks very much. We'll see you then.